Hello. So we went out to Jim Beam for their 90th anniversary. Watch later on at the end of the video some really interesting interviews with Fred and Freddy Noe. They've got all sorts of interesting stuff to talk about, and here we go. So these were the bottles available at their gift shop. This Golden's Origin, I tried that at the bar. That was really good, 119 bucks. Had a little book, chapter 8, 160 there. Puff not taken, that's fantastic. And this Distiller Series 5 was also very good, 75 bucks. It was distilled for 5 days, or, you know, in the brewing stage. Also had some Bookers there. I've seen that a little bit cheaper. That's the Beam House one. And Baker's 13, 155 bucks. So yeah, it's not always available everywhere, but it's pretty pricey. I also had a lot of Knob Creek stuff and the old Grandad, some more basic things, but yeah, sometimes a bit hit and miss in here. Sometimes I'll have some good stuff, and sometimes I'll have some medium stuff. Wow, Devil's Cut, old tub.
Wow.
Ooh. Now we're talking allocated. The coolest thing here is you can get some signed bottles. I ended up getting a signed bottle of Lineage a few months ago, which pride a place on my shelf over here. Don't think I'd get a Basil Hayden signed, but anyway, signed bottles are cool. And this is their other stuff. They had some really nice clothes. My wife got this really cool light jacket thing. So really nice gift shop, one of the better ones. So here we are walking out to the area. That's the Jim Beam house. That's actually where Fred Noe and Baker Noe, maybe not Fred Noe, but Jim Beam and, you know, all those guys actually grew up in that house. Now it's more just a, you know, part of the tour sort of thing, but, you know, pretty interesting to see all the history. It was really hot this day, so it was got a really bit warm towards the end. But this had this nice tent here with a stage up there and a bar over in the corner. Shout out to this guy who actually came up to me and said, "Hey, how's bourbon?" Which is like the first time that's ever happened. Comment below if this is you. Later on you'll see some interviews with Fred and Freddy Noe. Really interesting guys. Fred Noe's also hilarious. We had lunch out here, bit hit and miss on the food. The food is normally pretty good. The service can be a bit ho-hum. This band, check out this band. Let's listen to So in this little room you could get some dusty paws, so let's see what we picked. What's the oldest one?
What's the oldest?
Yeah.
Like,
What do you?
Oh, that's easy.
Kind of like a trick
the
question.
liquid inside is the oldest?
Yeah.
Or oldest bottle that was bought?
And the PX cherry. That's kind of
Yeah.
that's a cherry. The cherry.
What's the oldest one that was bottled?
Probably gonna be your Old Crow.
How old was that one?
What year is that one?
From 87.
I'll take it. I'll take it.
What are you getting, Vincent?
PX cherry.
Is it what, aged in sherry or something?
What is the
Sherry cask.
cherry case? It's very cool. What else is there? Baker's.
Baker's small batch. Now it's a single barrel, so it's a 3 evolutions. Old Crow, and this is discontinued Basil Hayden. It goes 2 rye, which is American and Canadian rye. 10-year-old high rye bourbon, and then the Caribbean rum pasture. Also go Bulls. That is my in-law too, so good for y'all.
What's the Baker's here? What's the deal on this one?
It's
That's
the
a
classic
small
Baker.
batch. Yep.
That's the classic before they change it to a single barrel. Don't do the Bakers because I got that at the house. I can get you a pour of that.
I'll take the old Crow.
Yeah, I'll take the Old Crow as well.
2 old Crows. I already marked it.
And these totes were free, and you could get your name put on it if you wanted it. We just took them without the name. But coming up is some interviews with Fred and Freddy Noe, and then later on just Fred Noe with one of their production people. Basically, some of the tidbits we heard is there are no plans for any more Knob Creek 12 cask strength. Could be some more Knob Creek coming out, like a Knob Creek that was finished in a rye barrel and vice versa, unlike the Burr rye, which is out right now. Some other stuff was the Bookers. The next Bookers is going to be unusually high proof, possibly over 130. And the Bookers Reserve is coming soon. It's going to be an H year. Also, there's a Booker's Rye that should be coming out at some point, but should only be like 7 years old, not like the good old one back in the day, which was much older. So anyway, I've just pretty much left these interviews in here as they were, so really interesting stuff. Fred's amazing, so watch on.
Knob Creek, which is my personal favorite brand. It's the bourbon that got me into bourbon even before I started here at the distillery. It's a pretty neat one, but Knob Creek is a brand that, Fred, you've always told us that Knob Creek was kind of yours, right? You want to tell us how that came about?
Well, it kind of, really Dad developed it. And, I was working in the bottling house down here at the time. I never had traveled much, and Dad was going on a promotional trip to Alaska. And I wasn't even supposed to go, but he had a good friend that was supposed to go with him. Had to cancel on him last minute. Come on, you go with me to Alaska. Okay, Pop, whatever, you're the boss. So we're getting ready to go, and he said, well, we'll save the company some money. We'll bunk together. I looked at him, I said, wait a minute. There ain't a bed in the country that can hold me and you both. No, dumbass, we'll get 2 beds, but we'll stay in the same room. I said, all right. So I was my dad's roommate for a couple of weeks out there on the road. They knew what kind of bait to put out. That's a good term. They threw the fishing in there. Dad could catch halibut and salmon. So, Alaska's not a huge market for bean. Not a huge market for much. There ain't a whole lot of people live in Alaska. But anyway, we were up there traveling around doing the different market visits. And we would go in, and Dad said, we got to make sure and get all the bottles open. At the time, we were introducing the small batch bourbons. And we had four bottles. You had the Basil Hayden, the Knob Creek, the Bakers, and the Bookers. Okay. So we would stop. Dad would always order Bookers. I'd order Knob Creek. And the guy from Alaska would either order Bakers or Basil, and the fellow from Beam that was traveling with us would take the 4th one. The reason we had to get the bottles open is if you don't get them open, the bar could send them back to the distributor. If you get them open, they can't send them back. That way they got to keep them. So it was kind of a trick back in them days. Bourbon wasn't very hot back in those days. Trying to sell 4 bottles of bourbon at once was a push. A lot of these bar owners would say, hey, I can't sell these 4 bottles I got total. Why the hell would I take 4 more? So, we were out there. Dad was actually hand selling, these small batch bourbons, trying to get it started and going on. Well, we were in Homer, Alaska, at the hotel called the End of the Road Hotel. Anybody's been to Homer, you probably know what I'm talking about. It's the last hotel before you get to Russia. And so my bed folded down from the wall to kind of give you an idea of, this room. It was pretty tight. And at the time, Dad had several bookers that day. We'd hit several accounts. And he was laying in the bed, and I was writing up this report he wanted me to do. I'm sure when we got back here to Kentucky, that thing hit straight to the garbage. He didn't turn it into any marketing people. How many accounts we visited, any of that shit. He never did that, but he wanted me to be more productive. So I'm sitting over scribbling them down. We visited this many, and anyway. He said, I got a question. How come you order Knob Creek every time we order our drinks? I said, well, I like Knob Creek. He said, well, that's about right. Knob Creek's for boys. Booker's is for men. I was I think 28 years old, drinking 9-year-old 100-proof bourbon, and I was a boy. But I wasn't drinking the cask strength 130 proof, so I was a boy. But he said, I'm going to give you Knob Creek. Got to kind of be yours. You can kind of work on that and go on the road and promote it. Little did I know that it wasn't going to be long after that I was going to spend more of my time around the world than I was going to be here in Kentucky. But that was kind of that's how Knob Creek became my baby in Homer, Alaska, years and years ago. And when Knob Creek sales outpaced Booker's, then I started getting my ass told. God damn, are you doing anything to sell my stuff? Pop, barrel strength is a little tougher to sell than 100 proof. But anyway, we had a good time. He liked to give me a lot of shit because Knob Creek sales exceeded Booker's and kept going on and on and kept growing, and Booker's was a slower pace. But we didn't release near as much Booker's as we did Knob Creek at the time. But it was, it was all good.
Flavor profile, I think, is pretty unique. We get a lot of that vanilla, caramel, a lot of those flavors coming from the sugars and the wood that you just can't really replicate without letting the whiskey sit there 9 years. You can pick that up right off the nose, and feel free to sample as you want. But a lot of complexity comes with that age. And so, as Justin mentioned, I've done a lot of the innovation for Knob Creek, and will continue to. We're looking at different ways, setting barrels for 9 years and then going back and getting them is one thing, but you can see there'll be a lot of varied quality, right? If you've got it in a good spot, you're probably going to get a lot of great flavor. If you've got it in a spot that's maybe underdeveloping flavor, it may not be very good 9-year-old. So what we've tried to do is use two levers. The age lever, we've got 12-year-old, 15-year-old, 18-year-old, maybe some more coming in the future of upper age of that. But also using, like the one we did this year was a bourbon and rye blend, because we don't just age the barrels to 9 years, dump them all together, and call it Knob Creek. It's an opportunity for us to talk about blending a little bit on Knob Creek. And even though what we would call it a batch, right? It's a small batch bourbon. Our team is blending those barrels to deliver that unique profile. And when you're letting it age for 9 years, you've got to kind of be paying attention, I guess. So by using that lever that we're using every day in a little bit different way, you might start to see some more blends or different releases talking about how we age the whiskey and then blending them together. But also because, when Knob Creek was created, it's kind of funny now, 9-year-old bourbon was old. It was the older product that people were being introduced to. Now it's kind of laughable to say that would be an old bourbon. So using that age and that same patience and blending techniques, letting that whiskey go on and continue to age longer, given the fact it kind of set the standard for upper age bourbon. Cheers.
Barrels aren't good.
Hope we don't have any legal folks here with us today, right?
It's all off the record. Prove it. I think statute of limitations are way gone.
There's a camera right there.
Great question. Any other questions, folks?
I would say, though, that kind of add to that, there's a blessing and a curse, because when we started putting everything in the computer, we could quickly assess kind of off things, right? Like Knob Creek's 9 years old. Well, what happens when it gets to 10 years old? That's how we got to Knob Creek 12. But then that also allowed us to see all that, and now that shit's gone. So now we know where everything is, so it's gotten tight. So at first it allowed us to start really laying out things like Little Book, different innovation plans. But now everything's very accounted for. So when we want to go kind of back to the hopper to find something new, there's a lot of head scratching that we got to do, because everything's already allocated to a brand or an innovation that's out there. So
Before you got computers, how many barrels did you have?
Oh, nothing like we got today. But it's way. We probably were up to tell me what letter. M, maybe?
oh no, we were doing hand,
that.
quote unquote, hand ledgering until SAP, really, if you ask me. Because it was still handwritten and somebody typed it in the computer. Fuck. Again, that's not really. So it was like 2014, I think, when we really, understood. So, a lot of barrels were tracked. One of my summers when I was working as a warehouse supervisor was being one of the other supervisors, Marty. Our job was to go look for the barrels that the union team said were not there or that were out of place. So we would just have them do quick checks as they were going through. And then we would go back and kind of look at what those were. Yeah, it was hot. We did a lot of tracking down that summer. And that was when we were transitioning to SAP, so that we could make sure that we weren't going to stumble across 50 barrels laying here, or that we go to this house and maybe there was 120 missing. Well, if you start, that's a little exaggeration, but 15 or 20 missing, and you start counting the ones that are laying in the aisle that are maybe nothing in them, but just kind of laid there, it equals those numbers. So 2014, in my opinion, we had quite an amount of barrels at that time. Again, not quite as many as we have today, but in the millions for sure. Oh, we still do. Knowing the barrels. Oh yeah. Knowing the barrels are there is one thing, but if you were to take every stave from a tree, you only get 2 to 3 barrels. That could actually be like a twin, brother, sister, cousin, and then if you put them side by side, they're still going to have a little bit different environment they're kind of aging in. So even though we know where they all are, it's kind of funny. We were talking about that last week. We need to we use the word gemba, kind of go to the source and examine. You go to a liquor store if you want to understand sales better, bar if you want to understand cocktails better. We were talking about doing gemba in the warehouse because we know where a lot of these kind of pockets of flavor are, but are there other ones that maybe we're taking a little bit for granted, and how do we start to circle around them again? So there's always anomalies that occur, good and bad. We just know where every barrel sits now. The flavor is still sensorially, you have to use to drive the flavor. Oh yeah. But are you any good at it? Just because you like the taste. That's what somebody says, I'd love to be on your century team. And I'm like, well, it's not always, rainbows and unicorns, really. It's reality, right? Like great taste of whiskey. It's a lot of times rainbows and the unicorns that are on the bad side because we're trying to figure out how many of these could you use to not offset the flavor profile. It's not always looking for those good things. It's mostly looking for and eliminating the bad. The really good ones get to work on the product side when we're making new things.
All right, folks. We might have time for about one more question if we got one. We got one down here.
Talk about the rye bourbon blend.
You can't ask questions.
Working. Wait a minute. Now he's working. It ain't all
He's working. He
said
said
shit.
He's got a notebook, a pen. All right, sorry, you can't ask questions. He declared he was working. But let's take a picture of him so that later, when he says something I'm not so fond of, I can say, "This is Steve's working pose here." That's enjoyment right there. Look, Mark, look at Mark. It's a good documentation. All right, Steve.
What was your question, Steve?
So simple. Back to the rye and bourbon blend. Did you say that those were aged to a certain point, then blended and aged together?
No, sorry. We've got something that are. We've taken Knob Creek rye barrels after they were freshly dumped, and we've dumped Knob Creek at 5 years old, I believe it was.
Yeah, we took rye and then put that into bourbon barrels.
Correct. Sorry. We're doing the opposite of that later this fall. We took rye at 5 years old and put it in freshly dumped 9-year-old bourbon barrels. You haven't seen that yet. It's still aging. But for this first blend, it's basically the base Knob Creek ages. So the rye is 7 years old and the bourbon is 9 years old. But we've talked about in the future doing other aged blends, but because those are the two base age profiles, we thought it was a good place to start. And then again in the future, you might see that cross blend where we dump the rye into former bourbon barrels to age out for the remainder of the time.
Well, Steve, glad you're here working. That's a great question.
Sorry I had to call you out, Steve. I thought you were here just having fun.
Okay, Rich. On a memorandum. There wasn't computers. You didn't have April 11th. You didn't have to have 45 checkoffs and all this. This is done, that's done. When the CEO said okay, and his name Rich, which was Rich Reese, it was done. But then Mike looked at him and said, "What's our budget?" Nothing. So Dad found some wine bottles up in Bardstown. Somebody had in the warehouse. He picked the barrels. He took the barrels right out of the warehouse, filtered out, strained out the charcoal, bottled it up, dipped them in wax in a homemade crock pot that a lady brought from her home. It was broken. Buddy Harrell, one of our old maintenance guys, soldered the heating element back together. I know Baker's grinning because he knows all these people I'm telling the story. Bill Beam, who was our shipping manager when he retired, but he ran a WLD section, he was down there with Dad, and they dipped them in wax. The ladies would hand label them. He wrapped them in tissue paper, and he gave them away as Christmas gifts. And then all these distributor folks came back with letters. What's this product? Can we sell this? So all of a sudden they figured, well, man, maybe this would be something we can sell. So they took it to market. And then Dad went on the road to promote it. Mike Donahoe tells this story, not loud, every time I hear it. They brought this product launch. Want everybody to get this brand new product. Most of it tasted it. But Dad's up on the stage talking shit like I am. And, one of the distributors nudged Mike and said, who is this guy? Where'd you get him? He said, that guy, that's Booker. That's Jim Beam's grandson. This ain't Bartles and James, man. This is damn good. And that's kind of how Booker got started. And Dad went on the road and promoted it, did tastings, and just putting it in people's mouths to let them experience, cask strength bourbon plus the small batch as well. But his theory was to let you cut it to the strength you want to drink it. Just because this bottle, this particular batch, is called the Beam House. This was actually named for Jim Beam's home, the home Dad lived in, the home that I live in currently. It's up on 3rd Street in Bardstown. That's where we live, and it's one that was 124.6 proof. But it comes straight from the bottle. You don't have to drink it at that strength. Water helps us a lot. Dad was never a big neat drinker of Booker. He was doing an interview with a whiskey writer, and he did what he called Kentucky tea. He'd take a tall glass, put a couple fingers of Booker's in it, and fill it the rest away with water. And this reporter asked him, why do you drink Kentucky tea? Booker always had an answer, and it was right in. He didn't have to think about it. He said, hell, why would I flavor my water with tea leaves when I can flavor my water with bourbon?
So we had a really great time out there. It's always good to listen to Fred, and he's got some great stories. So that's it for the 90th anniversary of Jim Beam. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.